fulfillment. What do? You pursue God with all your heart and your mind and your soul, because the Scripture says that He generously rewards those who diligently seek Him out. There are pleasures at His right hand forevermore. And the enjoyment of God becomes the pursuit that we now undertake, and it is there that we discover our happiness. Now, you say, well, does that mean we're always happy, happy, happy? No. Not even Jesus was always happy, happy, happy. Look at Gethsemane. But here's what I want to tell you, is that when we pursue God, we discover that there is no contradiction, or let me put it more clearly, sorrow and joy can coexist. They do not cancel one another. I've seen this at funerals, where people on the one hand had sorrow, and we sorrow, but not as those who have no hope. There is also joy in the midst of sorrow. There is a bringing together of the delight of God and the harsh realities of life, and they coexist in the lives of those who pursue the pleasures of God. Some of you perhaps have read the biography of George Mueller. If not, I commend it to you. Mueller always prayed. He prayed day and night, and he said that he received more than 8,000 answers to prayer. In fact, I ought to tell you this, that Mueller ran a number of orphanages in England and never asked for money. Now, this doesn't mean that he did it, that everybody is supposed to do that, because we have examples in the New Testament of people asking for money. But he decided that he would do it this way for this reason. He said because there were people who no longer believed that God was faithful, and he had to give them a demonstration of God's faithfulness. So he always prayed the money in. But Mueller said this. He said, what is the first task of the Christian? Now, what if this were not a message today? What if I were sitting in your living room and you and I were talking, and I were to look into your eye and ask you that question? What is the first task of the Christian, our first responsibility? Let me give you Mueller's answer. Mueller's answer was that the first responsibility of a Christian is to make his soul, or to find his soul, happy in God, to be content with God. See, because once you're content with God, you don't have to sin to find contentment. Remember that sin is what we do when God is not meeting our needs. If God were to meet our needs, if God were to be making us content, we'd be able to put up with an awful lot. That's why Mueller would get up early. He would read the Bible before breakfast with the intention of having his soul satisfied with God before he would begin the day. And then the rest of the day flowed from there. My soul, hope thou only in God, for my expectation is from Him. As the deer pants after the water brook, so my soul pants after thee, O God. When shall I come before the Lord? May I delight in Him. You think of all of the verses of Scripture that encourage us to find delight in God. But the moment we begin to do that, you begin to see all these thieves show up in our devotional time. They all come there saying, you're not going to be happy in God. You're not going to be happy in God. You're not going to be happy in God. What are they? Let me list those. People sometimes say, nobody can preach unless he knows his people. There's some truth in that, but I want you to know that all that a pastor has to do is to look into his own heart, and he's really looking into the heart of his congregation. We all struggle with the same things. Let me give you some thieves that will rob us of finding our all in God. First of all, guilt. Sin causes the cup of joy to spring a leak, and therefore the joy that is in our hearts is drained out because of sin that we've not taken care of. You come before God and say, I want to delight in you today. I want to receive the joy today that I have. And immediately a sin issue will come up with which you have to deal. But God is capable of getting us beyond that hump. He is the one, who gets us there. A second thief that shows up is anxiety. Anxiety says, you're not going to enjoy God. You're not going to enjoy God. Anxiety. What foolishness. This past week I woke up at 4 o'clock one morning and never went back to sleep because I was thinking about one small thing that I couldn't get out of my mind. What a waste of time. I woke up in the morning all tired and everything because of something that I couldn't do anything about anyway, lying in bed. foolishness. So God said to me, how do you expect to find your delight in me when you're focused on one little thing that you can't do anything about? Isn't that the ultimate foolishness? So we have to deal with that. We have to give those matters over to God so that these stray thoughts of anxiety don't come into our minds. And then there's such things as bitterness. Let me tell you the truth about Jonathan Edwards. Of course, I always tell you the truth, so I wouldn't have had to preface that with those remarks. But just in case, for those of you who are wondering, let me tell you a true story. Here's America's premier evangelist. You've all heard of him in the Great Awakening. Marvelous preacher who sometimes read his messages, at least at the beginning. He's the one, who preached sinners in the hands of an angry God, and people actually held onto the pew and trembled because they thought that the earth was going to open up right then and that the final harvest would take place while he spoke, we read.
And on Monday, we'll hear this story and the conclusion of this message, along with Erwin Lutzer's answers to some questions regarding this 9th lie about God. Dr. Erwin Lutzer has brought part 3 of The Lie That We Must Choose Between God's Will and Our Happiness, the 9th of 10 lies about God, and why you might already be deceived. Running to Win comes to you from Chicago's Moody Church. 10 Lies About God can be yours as a series on CD, cassette, or MP3. For full information, call toll-free 1-800-215-5001. That's 1-800-215-5001. Visit our website at runningtowin.org. Don't forget, this broadcast is supported by listeners like you. This is Dave McAllister. Join us Monday for our next Running to Win.